I teased to this in the chat earlier. Lauren, one of our founders here, transitioned from another research position into UX research. So I thought she could just take a couple of minutes and talk about how she did that, if you all are interested in hearing about how she transitioned into UX research. Lauren?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Thanks again for joining today. It's awesome to hear all your stories and your questions, and thanks, Giles, for sharing your information. You've really inspired me to get back into healthcare. I think I've moved into more financial services since then, but man, that was inspiring. So thank you. Yeah, so just a little bit about what Jen mentioned is I started my career in psychology, actually, and pretty early on realized I didn't want to be a clinician. I was super interested in the theory of everything and how things worked and human behavior. And so I got into clinical research in psychology, and I worked in a hospital at UT Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. And it was so fascinating to me seeing patients just really struggle, even going through the research process, signing consent forms, filling out data collection forms, understanding what their next steps were and what they had to do for the study. And one of my tasks was to translate our physical paper forms that originally women between the ages of 25 and 35 would have to fill out pages and pages and pages of Scantron forms every single month to turn in their data. And, you know, knowing your audience, knowing your target, like people don't like to use the mail and fill out Scantrons. And so we ended up switching to a digital collection format. And one of the things that I loved the most was working with the patients and helping them understand how to use the forms and seeing how they naturally understood the questions and used them. And I, you know, didn't know it at the time, but I was, you know, basically doing a form of UX research and understanding how they were using technology. And from there, I got super passionate about human-centered design and design thinking, did a lot of self-study on the topic, and ultimately transitioned into the UX world by becoming a lab manager and like a research ops person for a UX lab, using a lot of the same skills I had in clinical research, right? Like consenting, doing screening, understanding the target audience, just facilitating research studies and greeting participants. And so I started my career in research ops. Through there, just found a passion and got a lot of amazing mentors, took some classes and formal training, got to practice on the job through help and support of my managers and colleagues, one of which was Jen Blatz right here. And this was a while back now, but Jen taught me a lot of what I know. And that is just kind of my journey. I happened into it without really even knowing what it was. And I haven't looked back since. And just know for everybody trying to transition or learn new things, like a lot of what you learn in a hospital setting, in a clinical setting, in an academia setting, a lot of those skills are transferable, and you need to just brush up on the UX portion of it. And I know Dr. Morrison had mentioned, like, become that UX professional, get the right training underneath you. But a lot of what you've learned before can translate as well. You just need to beef up on the rest. And that is just a little about my journey. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for that, Lauren. What we'd like to do is have people raise their hands, and then that puts us up to the front of the, puts you at the top of the queue, and then we'll call on you one by one. And if you have a question you want somebody specifically to answer, that's fine. But anybody from the community is welcome to answer. So I have Abby here as my first question. So Abby, shoot.
Hello. So I'm wondering if anyone knows of a group where UX professionals and healthcare professionals are getting together to try and solve some of the problems we've all been discussing. Little groups, working groups, maybe. Maybe we could make a difference by all getting together. And if not, maybe we make one. Any thoughts?
Anybody know of any groups?
I don't know any group, but that is a great suggestion.
I'm part of a group. excuse me, sorry. I'm part of a group at the Kantara Initiative that's working on basically trusted identity solutions and standards. And the main area that we're using as use case is healthcare. So patient access to data, interoperability of electronic records, and essentially patient choice. It's very user patient centered.
Oh, great. Anybody else?
I'll put the thing in the chat. So that
Oh,
you can
thank
see
you.
the link.
Cool, I'll check it out.
Noreen,
Yeah.
Jazz, were you chiming in?
I was just clarifying the question, but I understand it now. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a group called the EHRA, which is the EHR Association. It's a subgroup of another industry group called HIMSS, which is a health informatics industry group. But basically, the EHRA has a clinician experience work group that works with physicians and across different vendors of electronic health records to sort of put those issues at the fore. We've done a few different various usability summits and work groups around that. It is limited to industry companies who are in EHRs, and then also physicians who are in various like medical societies. So it's not just like a totally public thing, but we have done some public events as well. We do a lot of educational pieces as well.
Cool. Any other groups?
I'm not very sure. Give me the right group we're referring to. So I'm part of the Digital Health Canada.
Could you say that again? I missed it.
Digital Health Canada. I will put that.
Digital Health Canada?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Anyone else? I would say, just to follow up, Abby, little self-plug here. If there isn't a group, create one. And that's how UX research and strategy got started. There wasn't a group that was addressing, there was a lot of groups for UX design. There were not a lot of groups for UX research, and that's how we got started. And we got a couple people kind of interested in some of our stuff. So
yeah,
start a group yourself if one doesn't exist.
Okay, that's what I'm kind of thinking. Not a lot of great people here. Maybe I can reach out to. Thank you, everybody. This is so good.
Awesome. Thanks, Abby. Smitra, you got a question?
Yep. Hi. Nice to meet everyone, and thank you, Dr. Giles, for this wonderful presentation. I work in an advertising agency right now. I've worked with Novartis. My current client is AstraZeneca, and we're creating portals and just areas like Dr. Giles was talking about, where we're empowering patients' decision making and doing all these processes and things like that. And what happens is that we end up with these regulations about, okay, there has to be time-based and we can't have these things online. It has to be things that are editable PDFs, and you can't have things livable on a website because AstraZeneca, for example, doesn't want to take responsibilities and things like that. Like, there's just so many federals and laws and regulations that just starts to come in, and it just throws off us and derails the UX process completely off the track. And the project starts with an objective of an experience of patient and HCP sitting together or whatever. It starts with an experience, but then it ends up being a take-home experience or something that is not even remotely close to digital, you know. So
did you have a question, or?
My question is, how do we educate ourselves as a UX designer? How do we educate ourselves a little bit more in terms of what these current regulations are in a little bit of more convenient lingo, so we understand, so we can kind of create a better experience from the start, from the get-go, rather than, you know, we create something and then we abolish it and then we start all over again. But then if we have that bit of a knowledge from the beginning, how do we get that access to that knowledge? you know, what are these regulations? We know that these are the limitations we're going to get through. I don't know if my question is clear or not, but how do we get through those FDA regulations or these clinical regulations, or what are those legal, you know, how do we get those or how do we decipher those laws and regulations before we start into thinking about digital experiences? And like if you're thinking about AR and VR, but if some advisory guy comes from London and says, oh, sorry, we cannot do this, it's not allowed, it, you know, the law in Europe says you can't do it. And I'm like, I wish we were told about this before, then we could have done something better. You know, now the time is running out. So how do we get that information prior?
Yeah, so I can interject here. So one of the first problems that happens when a lot of people work in digital health is that they start from scratch. What I mean by that is that they don't even really, as much as this seems like common sense, they don't assume that anybody else has had to go down this path before. So I'm sure we all can appreciate the benefit of secondary research. I'm not going to go into too much depth about that. But even truly trying to seek out people who've worked in this field, to collaborate with them, to learn from them, or if you really think that they're a rival, there's going to be someone out there who knows about something going on. And this is the problem. People, like, a common issue is that someone wants to make a product that is patient-facing to improve their health. By default, it's probably going to be a software as a medical device. Why? Because you're saying you want to improve their health. Are you going to get information from them, process it, make some sort of calculation and present a calculation, an output, a recommendation? That's what doctors do. You're providing healthcare services. That's software as a medical device. Now, even if you don't know this yourself, you should be trying to get people to vet the ideas from the get-go. This doesn't happen. Like I mentioned before, I think it was in a breakout room, there will be a CEO, there will be some product owners like, let's make this. And it's like, did anybody tell you this was a good idea beyond your reflection in the mirror? It's when you have this dialogue with people, you can realize, actually, is there a true market for this? Like, because there are business plans at times that are done for these sort of ideas, but is this really being vetted by people who are experts in the field? It normally will overcome all these issues that you were mentioning. Is it Smita?
Yes, Bertha. Yes.
Yeah. So that's what I find is a common issue, because obviously, as a clinical UX professional, I, and along with what I teach to my students, is to have this knowledge already, to be able to come and make those decisions. It's not our responsibility to make a decision of what the laws and the regulations are. That's actually technically the legal team. But we do try to have an awareness. But this normally will come, though, if you are at least getting people to vet the projects, vet the ideas in the first place. This is not common in healthcare. It's down to a lot of this competitive mindset that's rampant in digital health. It's like, oh, we're going to be the Facebook, the Instagram, the Amazon of healthcare, whatever else. Like, we can't tell that NDA, like, generally speaking, these NDAs are useless as well, because let's be honest, who really has £1 million and all this staff ready to just work on your idea you just told me 8 o'clock in the morning? Why by midday am I already a rival of you? What would I have done in the 4 hours that's passed, or even the 4 months that's passed, 4 years that's passed? If it's your idea, you've already got a network, you've already got money, you've already got a team. So if we talk more, because that's the real point, if we talk more, share, we can then vet these ideas and get those insights earlier on in projects. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
I would interject to support Dr. Gail's idea. That's what concept testing is all about. Before you go and launch into anything, try it first. That's something that has been done in market research for decades. And that's something I always urge UX researchers before they get into the nitty-gritty of the micro interactions to just vet the idea. The other thing is, when you're talking about legal and regulations, if you are in a company with a legal department, just ask a meeting with them. Get them to inform you. Ask a lunch. get informed. That's not something that is secret. Because you work at that company, they should be able to tell you this is what it is. It's boring. It's not what we want. But creativity is actually flourish when you have limitations. So sometimes people don't want to know about that, to feel that they are limited by regulation, by constraints, by research, because many times designers don't want to hear about research because they feel they're going to be limited by it. And so the information is out there. You don't have to do a big search. Just go inside the company and talk to your legal department. They should be able to inform you of the things that you need to consider. And again, concept testing is the first step to anything here.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks so much. I see Hillary next in line with her hand up. Hillary, you'd like to go?
Oh, actually, well, it was actually covered. I was just gonna add to the point about conceptual audits, not just by other designers, but also by like the legal team. Like, so after our research, maybe if we have like a few ideas, we could get them to vet each one and give recommendations. So like the problem solving can happen at an early phase. But everybody covered it. So it was great discussion. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, Hillary. I appreciate that input. Sarah, you're next on my screen. Unmute.
Yeah, so I think mine is sort of a similar follow-up to what Dr. Morrison was saying. I'm an RN that went into technology, and I think one of the things that I've learned, sort of, I'd call it the hard way, is following the money. I think that there are, and there was a comment that sort of sparked this too, as well as the conversation. It can feel like the decisions are being made by somebody else without real consideration for what the users need. And that was something that, again, just really drove me nuts. But I think coming into the awareness that I need, to learn how to have those conversations with all the different internal stakeholders in particular, and with an eye on how this is going to impact the ROI, frankly. I mean, how to have some understanding that if we develop a product that our users actually need, you are going to benefit even more greatly, rather than in my earlier career, I think it was like, well, you just can't do it that way. They don't like it. They won't, I mean, it was a disconnect that, and so I have seen in just the last year, this real desire to sort of take over the world, if you will, to a degree, by the user experience group, to be intentionally inserted in all phases of the product life cycle, to be, again, as many as you've said, and I think as Dr. Morrison has just said, to be really sure that we're listening and we understand what problem we're solving for, and can we solve for it, and does it actually make sense financially as well. I don't think I was as aware of the ecosystem because I was so excited about the user research, and I was excited about being a nurse and technology, and to sort of expand has been very helpful. And even when, on the last topic, it is frustrating. We have tons of state laws that are different, and so to have to be able to design a global system, if you're talking about just in the United States, to say nothing of, the world, I mean, to take all of that in is simply a necessity. And when you have these other stakeholders, that you can have the dry conversation with the attorneys to say, what do we need? Again, I guess I'm curious what other people's thoughts are on that, because I think for me, finally spinning it and saying, I can have a conversation with a C-suite executive if I can tell them that if we develop this because we have listened to our end users and they are going to be happier, and therefore we will have more maintenance dollars, and we will also be able to have new customers because we're providing a product that they will use. They're not going to throw it down the back stairwell. So I guess I'm curious if I'm on the right track, and I see some nodding heads, which makes me happy, but I'm curious what other people's thoughts are about more of us in the design process at all stages.
I definitely agree with that. I would also encourage folks, as you start to learn about these regulatory spaces, there needs to be more conversation with regulators. I think that there's a lot of, I think if you look at international markets, it's really interesting the level of decision making that happens due to regulatory requirements. There are requirements in Denmark, for instance, that get down to specifically where there needs to be highlighting on certain kinds of data. That is a good instinct and made with the best intentions around safety, but it also then extremely limits the solution space. Right now, we've prescribed the solution as part of the regulatory thing that's supposed to actually just be a guardrail. You know, and so there's I think a lot of misconceptions around this. There are things in American healthcare as well that also suffer from this, where there was sort of a small sentence that ended up becoming this thing. Well, now we have to have that on screen at all times, and we can't take it away. You know, we get physicians now who ask, "Why is this thing on screen?" Well, here's the clause. It doesn't really feel good to anybody in that circumstance. So I think it's a two-way street, but I think to your point of you need designers on and really all the stakeholders having a frank conversation as those ideas come together throughout the whole process.
Cool. Anybody else have a perspective they'd like to share? To Sarah's point.
I would say that Sarah is on the very right track. That's the right track. That's where everybody should be going. Just talking and stop working in silos and understanding the bigger picture, connecting with other groups inside organizations. Because again, no company is going to invest in user experience if there is not going to be a business outcome out of it. There's no point. I mean, we can have humanistic goals for user experience, but it has to be about the survival of the business.
Yeah.
And so exactly even non-profit organizations, they have to make money to be able to pay for their operations and their workers and all that. So it has to have a commercial component to it.
Yeah, that's exactly what Giles was talking about earlier too, right, Giles?
That's it. In fact, this is something because it's one of the things I was even teaching earlier on today to some other people about the 6 measures of UX, the way I see it as. So the obvious one comes from a triad, so 3 of the measures. So usability, accessibility, and satisfaction. Like, can you actually perform a task with it? Is it accessible? And when someone does perform the task with it, is it satisfying, the end result? Is it not just that it's functional? But in the other 3, then, the success triad is it feasible, viable, or desirable? Like, there's times when UXers are designing stuff where it's the equivalent of trying to use a spoon to fly into outer space. Like, you're asking too much of the development team. You've got to be, if you're not in communication with them, the recommendation is not going to turn to an initial finished product. It needs to be actually viable. There needs to be somewhere there's money or resources that's needed to fuel this machine. Otherwise, we won't have no product or service to give to the users. And crucially, it needs to be desirable. If no one asked for this and it doesn't solve a problem, no one will use it. Like, I kid you not, one of the things I had to share through the Clinical UX Association on LinkedIn some time back was these 2 men who decided that they had invented a glove to use for women who are menstruating to, dispose of what's passing every cycle. And I'm like, no one asked for this. This isn't a problem that women are having. Why are you as men thinking that this is going to be, and worst of it, it's one of those Dragon's Den, Shark Tank type things, and they were going to get some money. Like, no one actually, where is the evidence to back this up beyond your imagination? Because that's not really evidence. It might trigger a spark for you to do research, but there is no research that backed up that this was a good idea. And that's why I say there's the 6 measures. We should be, as UX professionals, having awareness on where our product fits with those 6. If you don't see something positive for all 6 of those, usability, accessibility, satisfaction, feasible, viable, desirable, then it's a wrap. You're wasting your time. You cannot have a deficit in any of those 6.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. Hillary, it looks like you have your hand up. Did you have an additional, or was this just left over from before?
Oh, I had a different question.
Oh,
but
okay. Yeah.
Oh, I can go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. I just wasn't sure.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Oh, sorry about my camera, everyone. I'm in my car. My Wi-Fi is a little iffy. What do you do as a UX designer when you have a lot of projects with really like tight or infeasible deadlines? Like, how do you incorporate a UX process and a research process? Because that's a challenge that I'm facing now. We have a small team, but due to the desire to create a reputation, we the company tends to overcommit and overpromise in terms of deadlines and deliverables. So as a designer, when you still want to create a product that meets those targets and those KPIs, like how do you go about it? Does anybody have any tactics?
I have confronted this issue of speed my whole career. And I've, depending on the context, there's different arguments, but one that usually works or can work sometimes is that if you go too fast in the beginning, you're going to have to fix it later. And if we can spend the time to define the product well for all the users, all the different people who are going to experience it, then later we're not going to need to come back and fix it or do reverse engineering to figure out why people aren't actually using it. So there are some arguments there that you might be able to use. I don't know, what do other people say? I know this is a big issue.
I think to add on to that, that was really good. And to recall back one of Dr. Giles' slides where he talked quickly about ROI, having those types of things in one's back pocket helps, right? And those I found in those types of situations for the more resistant people, once you give them, it's not just me and you, he said, she said situation. When I'm giving you a third perspective of like data that's been done, research that's been done to back up why this is valuable, as my uncle would say, measured twice, cut once, right?
Yeah.
It helps in situations like that. That's just to add on to your take, Abby, that I think that kind of stuff helps.
That's great.
Thank you so much. And Abby, I experienced that. Currently, we are having to do a lot of rework due to these commitments. Some happened before I came on. So I love both of those, Jose and Abby. Thank you.
Yeah, you can point to those things.
I have some questions. So there's some short-term, medium-term, long-term stuff you can do. The short-term where it's like you aren't going to be given any more time, you're not going to be given any budget, what you're supposed to do. Like right now, what you're going to do. And this is where there are more UX research methods or even design methods available to us where you don't need participants, or at least you don't have participants to do the methods that can still add value. The first one is heuristic evaluation.
Yes.
You can do a heuristic evaluation of your own product, of your own work, let alone a product already out there. Even from a sketch, you can do a heuristic evaluation. Like, you can know, have you provided feedback to the user? Have you used the minimalist flow? Have you allowed someone to recover from an error? Do a heuristic evaluation. You don't need a user to. If you're not already doing it before usability testing, you're wasting. You can get a lot of issues from heuristic evaluation before you even do usability testing. Another thing that is really, really powerful is a task analysis. If you've done a good task analysis, you're already, before a heuristic evaluation, looking for potential issues that someone have and how you can optimize the flow that you're creating. So those, I think, are very good short-term things. And then the other thing is do interviews, focus groups with staff. It's not ideal with colleagues, not ideal, but they can at least point you in the direction of issues, especially if this is a long-standing issue, because their opinion starts to move more towards the territory of fact, because it's persistent and it's shared by loads of people, and there's a track record for it. So that's a short term. The medium term one is you need to always explain why you're doing what you're doing to anybody in a position of power, so your manager, your stakeholders, that, the work. So people will hear this over time. It's like, well, you said you need to do user research. It really takes 4 weeks, or in this situation, it really takes, a week. Like, okay, you've told us now, and I've seen this to be true because it's happened before. And in the long term is there has to be a standardized process of doing UX work. It doesn't mean that research always takes 4 weeks and wireframing takes, you know, a few hours. Like, that's not what I mean by standardizing. What I mean is that someone's got an idea. Have you filled in the form to submit your request? Okay, so we've now planned the work. We've done some, we've got an idea of what your needs are. Here's a statement of work. It's a contract, in-house contract or whatever it is. Here's a contract of the work we're going to do. Can you sign it, please? You are saying the process you have to follow to have that change to our contract. This is what it's going to cost you to have the change. But, you know, but again, you can't do that straight away. But that's what you want to work towards, is having standardized processes where people actually come to you the way they go to the engineers. When there's a change, it has to be zero. There has to be a formal change request. It needs to be assigned to a developer, and then they will work on it. Otherwise, it will gather digital dust. We need to do what the developer and take back control.
Amen.
So hopefully that helps and empowers you lot.
That does help, because like Abby and Jose gave a persuasive, the persuasive tactics, and then you gave like those design and research task tactics. That's extremely helpful. And also learning from the developers, because they're more standardized in terms of everybody understands them more. They've kind of had the time to kind of have their systems and protocols in place. That's very helpful, because even though there are lots of us as designers, I still feel like it's very new at the same time, when people are still trying to figure us out and where we fit in. So that is really helpful, looking at what those engineers are up to, because we could learn something from them. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. Kristen, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, hi, I'm Kristen. Thank you so much, Jen, for hosting. This has been super educational, fantastic. And thank you, Dr. Morrison. This has been amazing. I've been trying to sit here, trying to figure out how to formulate my question in a way that makes sense. So hopefully this comes across. But Dr. Morrison, I was really struck by some phrase that you had mentioned in your talk for discussing root causes. And I come from research, but also research operations, and sitting in that world. And my organization did a huge transformation to focus on BPI and Lean and Six Sigma. And Jen, I was the one who posted the pic of the Lean UX for Startup book. You know, I'm reading that. So my question is, I'm going back into research. It's been a minute since I've been immersed in that field, but I'm doing a nonprofit right now, and I'm working on a project where there's a lot of overlap between trying to figure out feature development, but differentiating versus process development improvement. And Lean Six Sigma has a lot of tools and methodologies to help with root cause analysis. And right now, what I'm trying to do is bridge those two with this project to make sure that there's not duplicate efforts to solve the same problem. So my question to you is, do you see any use for Six Sigma methodology in UX research? Because I got to say, I'm using UX research right now for my Six Sigma project. So I just wanted to know if there's a way to bridge those two so that they're not living in separate universes, but that they can help each other. Does that question even make sense at all?
It makes sense to me. I'm not an expert on Lean Six Sigma. I would say, though, that in principle, like the whole concept of Lean, which, just to be clear, don't learn it from the Lean Startup or that Lean UX book. That's not a good way of learning about Lean. That's very different. Lean is about how can we make stuff as efficient, the process is as efficient as possible, which means not wasting time, not wasting resources and the like. So with that, when I think about UX research, it goes back to what I was saying before, to be honest with you. How can you be pragmatic? Like, you have to still be data-driven with what you're doing. The data can be collected through some sort of standardized or systematic approach. This is the UX toolbox. What methods are you using that's going to allow you to collect data in a standardized way? Whether it's a root cause analysis, which is exploratory research, really, what that is to me, that's what it is. You're exploring to try and really fully understand what's going on, and then followed by explanatory research to explain what's going on. Whatever method you need to use to gather that data, I'm not too fussed, as long as you find that the data is valid and reliable. If you can do something with it, if you can make a decision, come to a conclusion, then actually it's successful research. So that's how I see all of this, really.
Great, thanks for that. I know we're like super way over than we had planned. This has been so amazing. All the questions and comments. Let's one more. Anybody else have one more burning question? And then we'll be able to let everyone go on.
Not a burning question, but quick shout out to everyone. Thank you for all the information that's been floating around. I think it's been really good. I think we've all taken really good stuff out of this so far. Anyways,
Agreed, Jose. Thank you. I totally agree.
I don't have a burning question, just a comment to, and I've posted in the chat as well. I just wanted to add to Hillary's comment about deadlines and wanted to add to Dr. Gal's answers that having UX roadmaps, and I used to do my own mini roadmaps and just think and plan ahead of what would be needed and what would be required and things like that, and just making your own list and being a little bit more proactive just helps with the deadlines and just trying to figure out, okay, this is what we might need, or this is where the stronghold might be and things like that. Just creating that sort of and mapping out and planning out with the team and just show them this is where the problem is going to happen if you don't have this. So I think that can help. I just wanted to add that.
I love that, Murta. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It got me through EY. So that's what I'm saying. I went through tremendous pressure of deadlines. So I know exactly when you mentioned that. It was a horrible experience. And I know when Dr. Giles mentioned about Jira, and when he said that I need ticketing for changes, I was like, oh my God, he's literally talking the same thing that I mentioned to my bosses. So
I see.
Yeah, there was absolutely no management. There was no management software before I left. That's when they launched it. So
wow.
Yeah, there's the UXers really have to be created in that engineering system where it comes as a process, and that's what the standardization should be. Not about, oh, it takes 4 hours to make wireframes and it always takes 4 hours to make wireframes. No, that's not standardization, but the process is standardization, how it comes to you.
Wow, awesome. Oh, I'm excited for Monday now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Again, thank you so much for everybody who carved out some time on their Saturday to attend World IA Day. There's other events happening around the world right now. Check out other events. They might be of interest to you as well. And a huge thank you to Giles for informing this group. I mean, I learned a ton, and I thought, it's so applicable to not just clinical research, or not just research, but clinical, but all of UX, like all industries. So much of you said could be applied to things outside of healthcare and medical fields. So I really appreciate that. Well, I'm going to.
It's been a real pleasure here. It's been planning, great.
Great. Thank you again so much, everyone. Thanks for attending and have a fantastic weekend. See you later. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.